Hello, and welcome to the very first live virtual event from the JCC of Metro Detroit's Lenore Marwell Detroit Jewish Film Festival. This is our 22nd annual festival, and we are so glad you could be with us tonight. My name is Jamie Loeb, and I'm the Senior Director of Cultural Arts at the JCC of Metro Detroit. Tonight's film discussion and all of our live film discussions are presented in partnership with the Detroit Institute of Art's Detroit Film Theater. I want to thank them for their support and their help in making these live events a reality. One of the ways the Detroit Film Theater has been a help in making these events work is through their director, Elliot Wilhelm. He'll be joining us tonight as our moderator, as he will for most of our film discussions. He's one of the deans of the film scene of Detroit and a part-time faculty member at Wayne State University. We are thrilled to have him on the team and for him to be acting as our film expert in residence. This is our very first virtual film festival, and we are thrilled to be able to connect with all of you from the comfort of your own homes. The festival runs October 4th through the 30th. And all of our films are available to watch on demand whenever you like throughout that entire time. We do have one film that is a special event only available for a short time. It's called Autism the Musical. And all the details are on our website, so I highly recommend you give it a look. While you're here on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and set the reminder so you never miss one of our live virtual events. You can find our full lineup of films and events. You can buy tickets to individual films, and you can buy a festival pass, all at our website, culturalarts.jccdet.org/filmfest. Take a look. So this evening, we absolutely want to hear your comments and your questions. We have a great discussion prepared for you, but you are part of the fun. So if you have a question, you have an idea, you have something you want to share, put it in the comment box below the video if you're on YouTube, or if you prefer, you can text it to, there we go, that number right up there in the corner of your screen. Send us a text and we will add it to the comments so that everyone can see what you have to say. Tonight, we are discussing the film Flawless. It's an Israeli drama about a group of teen girls and their struggles with body image, dating, and just life as an adolescent. Our guest speaker tonight is Rabbi Jennifer Lader from Temple, Israel. Her work there is focused on youth engagement. She's often called the youth guru. So she's going to help us discuss some of the issues raised by Flawless. So please join me in joining our host, Elliot Wilhelm. Welcome, Elliot.
Thank
and our
you.
Guest speaker, Rabbi Jennifer Lader.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hi, here.
It's good to see you. Just to start off, as a youth engagement person, what was your response to this movie in terms of how it faced some of the issues that Jamie was just mentioning? And in a sense, the centerpiece of the movie is a transgender girl who is kind of the satellite around which all of the other youth problems exist. But most of the people who are watching have probably seen the film already. But how did the film strike you in general?
So, as a youth worker at a synagogue, the privilege of being in my position is that I get to see really into the lives of a lot of our teenagers. We have a very large program and a lot of teens come through. And in the past 9 years, I've been serving at Temple Israel. Every single issue, except for the, selling your organs on the black market, spoiler alert, but all of these issues come up regularly in our teen population. And I'm privileged to walk that journey with so many of our teens as they're exploring who they are and what's important to them and how they see themselves in the world around them and how they present themselves to the outside world. And so to that end, I thought that it was very realistic, the way that the girls spoke to each other and talked to each other. But when I was watching it, I felt almost as if I was watching two separate films, that one really focusing on outward gender presentation, dressing a certain way, looking a certain way, having our bodies look a certain way to entice people around us, to get a boyfriend, to be asked to prom, and how young women and young men actually, but this film focuses on young women, decide how they want to present themselves based on their perception of how others want them to look. So I think that was like a really, that part felt very authentic and very almost overwhelming to me to hear young people speak about changing through surgery, changing the way their bodies look to be more pleasing to other people.
Right.
And then the other issue, which could have been a whole movie in and of itself, was this incredible, the acting of the woman that was playing this transgender woman was just astounding and so heartfelt and meaningful and subtle. And I loved every scene with her in it. And I felt like she was really the most authentic part of the film, and that I really wanted to know more about her and her story and her family, and less about, getting asked to prom. That felt really formulaic, and the really original, interesting part for me to watch was that of this transgender young person.
Right. But sometimes I think just to be on the defensive side, and I totally understand and to a certain degree agree with you, by putting an issue that might be new to people, might be controversial in terms of sort of general movie-going audiences. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes if you put it in the framework of something that is conventional and traditional in terms of story structure, it can sometimes make the issue resonate a little bit more positively with the people who are seeing the film. And in that light, I would point to the fact that this movie received 12 Israeli nominations for their version of the Oscars, and it won quite a few of them. I think 4 of the top awards, and was nominated for Best Picture of the Year. And wasn't the
actress who played the transgender woman? She was nominated, and that's the first transgender actress that's even received a nomination, right? I was reading about it.
Absolutely, Stav Strashko is her name.
Amazing.
She was remarkable.
Yeah.
And it was an extraordinary performance that was convincing, I thought, in terms of its emotional power.
Right.
She was clearly, she has an extraordinarily expressive face and was able to do things on film without it all being dialogue. There are, there are some lines that sort of pop out at you as being the kind of line that's going to show up in a film like this to let people in on on what the idea of it is. One of the her friends in the film says, I was born a girl, and she says,
yeah, I
was born a girl too.
Yeah, that was really great.
And that, I think, will resonate for the first time, perhaps being exposed to this on a big screen, with a lot of people. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just gonna add that, these kinds of films and this kind of representation in the media, I think, is more common here than it is in Israel. And so I was also trying to watch it as an Israeli who may not have access to those kinds of portrayals on a regular basis in the same way that we do. I was thinking about some of my transgender teens that I've had throughout the years who are these incredible, resilient, brave, and strong young men and women. And like, everybody wants to be friends with them. Like they're almost like, it's like extra cool if to be friends. And it's so public and so talked about in the teen community here that it ends up, they're cast as heroes instead of as sort of beaten down protagonists. And so it was interesting to me also to see, to sort of try to see it through the Israeli lens, where maybe these kids have never met someone transgender before. Maybe the adults who are watching have never met someone openly transgender before. And they're a really new country, and it's different in the Middle East than it is here, even though Israel is certainly on the right track. But to see it through that lens, I understand what you're saying about creating something that almost feels like Clueless plus this issue that Clueless didn't have in the 90s or whenever it came out.
And that was actually, when I was stepping on what you were saying, it was because I wanted to ask you about that, about the fact that Israeli cinema has grown in terms of its breadth of subject matter and general sophistication in the last 20 years, I would say. My first Yeah, I've been programming films at the DIA for, what is it now? My God, 46 years.
Oh my God.
Now, yeah, I know. I started when I was 7.
Yeah.
But during the first 20 years, there were really just a handful of Israeli films. It was considered almost a novelty in and of itself, which is one of the reasons festivals like this are so great, and that you get to see so much of the exceptional work that's coming out of Israel, although not all of the films are certainly Israeli. But now I'm at the point where if I'm at a festival, like the Toronto Festival, which I just completed on a virtual basis, watching 24 movies, and the New York Film Festival, which I'm in the middle of right now, all of them right here in my living room. When you see a new film from Israel, I gravitate toward it.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm Jewish, but because it's probably going to be a pretty good picture, and it's just an absolute delight to be able to see that happening, and to see more and more subject matter.
Right. I sorry to interrupt you, but
No.
I also find myself, I love Israel, and I love seeing Israel portrayed normally in media. And so like seeing their high school and seeing them driving around on their scooter and through neighborhoods in Jerusalem, and Israeli television now is becoming so popular with our people, Shtisel and all that cool stuff out on Netflix, but it's becoming a lot more accessible. Whereas like I used to only be able to watch an Israeli film in my Hebrew class, now people can just get them and they're sort of available, and it's really great cultural exchange both ways now. They're not just watching Friends on repeat. We also get to sort of experience, what they're thinking about and what's important to them and what's coming up in pop culture for them too.
Right. So in terms of it got a lot of awards, no question about it, and it made it across the Atlantic last year. Right. It was nominated for a couple of prizes at the Tribeca Festival in New York, and I'm wondering about the film's popularity. If outside of the awards that it was nominated for and its prestige that it's gotten, was it a film that got people talking? Was it a film that was discussed in the press, the Israeli press, as was it controversial, or was it something that went down pretty easily?
I don't know. I found this film through the festival in the same way that you did, I think, and I'm not sure. I don't. But I'm going to ask my Israeli friends if they've heard of it and if they've seen it and what they thought. I'll let you know next time we talk.
Thanks. And I'm curious as to any of the young people who you deal with. What would you do in terms of this film? Would you say this is a movie that would offer you a point of view that will make you feel less alienated, more part of a community, validate your feelings and your instincts? What relevance would it have for young people who are either not Jewish, Jewish, but are people with the issues that you deal with?
So I think that for me, everything's an opportunity to learn and grow. And so if I were to screen this film with teenagers, I think I would be looking for a few points to discuss after the fact. One of which, of course, how relatable are the characters in the film? Do you feel as if you're constantly, dressing for a performance? I know that one of the girls, I think it was the Ethiopian teenager who said, I'm not doing this for anybody else, I'm doing it for me. And her boyfriend tried to talk her out of it. Like, how do they take that? Do they really believe that she's trying to change her body for herself? Have the teens ever felt like they needed to change their bodies? Was it for themselves or to get, attention of the people they were attracted to use it as a jumping off point to talk about body image and self-esteem and confidence and where those things come from. And then I would also really love, I marked this because I really do want to watch it with a group of teens, to talk about cultural difference, like how the high school experience looks and feels different and similar to them. Like, do they walk into a pack of girls in the bathroom and are petrified about what they're going to say to them? Is there this sense of popular versus not popular in the same way that it shows in the film, and also like how teenagers who are not heteronormative, like how does the community rally around them or rally against them? Like, that's really interesting to me. Like in West Bloomfield, Bloomfield Hills, Walled Lake, like these places, do they feel like this sort of typical experience of bullying and harassment? Do they feel like that's still an issue here in the same way that it was portrayed in the film? And would any of them consider selling a kidney on the black market for plastic surgery?
Right.
I'd really be interested to know that one way or the other.
Yeah, and there are also little bits of prejudicial behavior on everybody's part, even though the central character during, for the most part gets the bulk of it. The whole business about, oh, are you Ethiopian?
Yeah.
To this one girl, and she's immediately, oh, I'm going to get that now.
Yeah.
It was a little bit more of an open view of teenage behavior,
right?
That is probably universal to some degree.
Yeah, and Israel has a lot of work to do with regard to racism. I mean, that is also one of these underlying themes of the movie that's sort of peripheral but not central to the main message. And that is very real and very palpable when you're there in schools, on the street, and something that Israel is sort of coming to terms with. There's in a moment of reckoning in the same way that we are here in this country. I'm reading the comments, and Phyllis, who's watching, said that maybe I have a limited view of acceptance of transgender teens. And Phyllis, I unfortunately think you are absolutely right that, the teens that I interact with are ones that are part of a strong, safe, welcoming, loving community and may feel very different in terms of their confidence level, in terms of their feeling of familial support and support of their friends and neighbors. And I hope that that more transgender teens are able to live in communities like ours here and are able to experience that level of acceptance that I think our teens have hopefully are experiencing now.
And on that level, Rabbi, would you consider the ending of this movie to be wishful thinking or magical thinking even?
I don't know. I thought the ending was fairly realistic in that when people actually make friends with somebody who's, who is queer on the spectrum of identity, when they really get to know somebody, that it really breaks down barriers. And I think that, the sort of aftershocks of realizing that this teen is transgender and that she can be really integrated into the community, not with everybody, but with the people with the people that count. Is a really important message, and one that I think we see here too, that once people get to know people as human beings, that it sort of changes their perspective. The guy that calls her, a disgusting pervert or something like that, the guy that she liked, the young man that she likes, who's also tortured in his own right, in the end, they make up. And I think that's really an important thing, an important message about resilience and openness and a pathway to acceptance for teens to build a core group around them.
Do you think and I know you don't know this, and neither of us really knows what the audience breakdown was for the film, say in its Israeli release, but do you think that the people of the age, teenagers depicted in the film, do you think audiences of that age who go to see this film will find the movie relatable or find it fictionalized to the point where a comment like Phyllis's will be what the kid's reaction is going to be to it, like, oh yeah, right, sure.
Yeah, no, I found it really authentic. Like, it felt good and authentic to me. I think the actors were really excellent. The Stav, I don't remember what her last name is, but
Strasko.
She was 27 in the movie, and I really thought she was 15. I mean, these actors were really excellent, and I found them. I am very sensitive to that sense of authenticity for teens. Like, I'm careful about what I show them. I don't want to ruin my street cred. So, but I think that the reason it was popular, the reason it won awards, is because it did feel relatable and accessible and not too fantastical, regardless of the fact that in the middle there's this whole like the central piece of the story with Karen, like this trafficker of organs. Like, that was such a crazy piece of it. And yet that for me was like the most intriguing and the most interesting. And that's like, I wanted more of that storyline. That was the most fantastical part of it, I think.
Karen, I think, could have, and this is just the editor in me speaking, or Mr. Rewrite.
Yeah.
Karen came on so much like a wicked witch. She was oily and so untrustworthy that I was wondering how any of these girls, let alone all of them, would just go trotting off to sell their kidneys in Kiev, which is the last place you want to have surgery, probably. I don't know. Somebody's listening. I didn't mean it, folks. But the whole scheme is so grotesque, and of course these things actually do exist. And I guess to a certain degree she was charming, but you do wait for her to become violent, because that over charming quality that she has really does set off alarm bells.
But you know that, and I know that, but I'm not sure that every 15-year-old knows that. Like, I felt that exact same thing from the very beginning. Like, obviously she's a mega villain. Like, from the moment they talk to her, she's this sleazy, like, but Israelis, the culture's so different, and everyone is so like even keel, that maybe she seemed, instead of like a sleazy villain, she might have seemed like a fairy godmother who's granting wishes, who's so overly kind and generous. And I can see that being really attractive. And the fact that she was a woman, and the fact that she was young, and I just, she was the right kind of villain, I think, for this movie. And
I think to some degree, all of us, no matter what age we are, in the right circumstances, or I should say in the wrong circumstances, will take candy from strangers.
Yeah, right.
If they know just how to say it, and just how to get it across. So that's terrifying in and of itself. Yeah,
for sure. But I did appreciate, like, I think the part that I found unbelievable was that they figured it out and she got in trouble, and like the girls went to the authorities and it became a story on the news. Like, that I think wouldn't happen in this case, that she would disappear and slide away, and that would be that. So that was like a good, solid, good feeling, but fairly unrealistic in terms of what actually happens out there. Yeah.
And she was also, really running that ring. She didn't waste a trip to the airport.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Picking up one set of kids and dropping off the others. Yeah, it was quite awful. And they were all lucky to have survived, of course, too, in the film. But it's it's an unusual piece of filmmaking. In the United States, probably not necessarily so, but I found it quite watchable, and I think it's primarily due to the level of the performances of all of the cast members. The father was a bit sketchy, and he was a bit angry, and he still has his issues to be cleared up, and you ultimately see that he's going to be okay. But overall, I would guess that there's going to be an American remake. It's one of those movies that just feels like, even though it in some ways feels like an American remake of something that's been done already, it's got that structure that I think could be something that the Disney people are at this point saying, hey, let's get the rights to this and see if we can do it. And there have been Israeli films in the last several years that have had the story rights bought and brought to an American audience. But that, of course, also brings up the tragedy of movie watching right now, which is that to see this film, like any film, in a theater would be a different experience.
Sure.
And we, particularly with a festival like this one, and I'm probably going to mention this at every chance that I have to discuss movies with either people like you, people who make films, people who love films, that right now we're all in a period of mourning, in a sense, about the theatrical movie going experience. And I know some theaters are going to be opening here in the Detroit area this week on Friday the 9th. The governor's given the okay for some theaters to open. Some theater chains are actually going to be closing because they're angry about the lack of Hollywood films to be seen on the big screen. But in a sense, I would hope that at some point, with the theaters that are going to be open, even though there isn't a lot of Hollywood product, that they may be willing to take a chance on showing films like Flawless or some of the other films that we're going to be seeing in this festival. Because it may well be a chance to expose people to world cinema outside of just the traditional art house, like the DIA's film series or the Maple, both of which do fine work. But right now, it may be a time that getting a global point of view might be an interesting way to go.
Right.
But films will be back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are a few questions in the chat. Karen's asking, or I guess it's really a statement that Eden is portrayed really sympathetically. She steps in as a mother figure to her siblings. She's subjected to bullying. She's sort of not fully understood by her father and doesn't have a close group of friends. And so for anyone who's unfamiliar with the circumstance of transgender teens in general, it's more digestible to see her at home and in that light versus just being sort of a victim at school.
Right.
And then the other comment was that it seems as if the teen issues raised are the same teen issues that have been raised in every teen film. Do you feel like it points to the universality of teen experience or just the repetitive nature of films? I think that, this is a really serious part of adolescence is our body image issues, gender identity, sexual identity, all of these things in this liminal time between childhood and adulthood, where people are separating from what they've been told and sort of figuring out what they want for themselves. And I think that lots and lots of things fall into that category, and that you can't really have a teen movie without addressing pieces of it, or it doesn't feel authentic and real. And so I think that all teen movies, all films, serious films sort of that address the experience of growing up, are going to touch on body image, are going to touch on confidence, are going to touch on bullying and insecurity. And, there are all these other issues, eating disorders and sexual assault and all sorts of things, but they all fall under this umbrella of who am I, what's important to me, what are my priorities, who am I living for, who am I presenting myself for, and how do I live my best, most authentic self in a way that's going to make me happy in the future. So I think that just is the teen experience, and films are trying to capture this special essence that we don't really have in the same way at other points during our lives.
And the simple fact of rejection, that horrible sensation that you're the person who's not going to be welcome at the lunch table, or you're the person who's been singled out. And in a film like this, the specific issues of body image or transgender status, those are ways in which we can see a reason for that kind of rejection. Maybe it's because I was just a naive kid, but I remember a lot in the Detroit public schools that I went to as a young person, that there was always somebody, one kid, two kids, there's always somebody who was laughed at and ridiculed. And it wasn't necessarily because the kid did poorly grade-wise or exceptionally well, or was considered to be different in some obvious way in which you could say, well, we can talk about the whole idea of who gets picked on to be rejected by a large population. And I'm talking about a time before social media and all of the ways in which it's now like a wildfire in which you can easily single somebody out as a potential victim. That has always intrigued me as to exactly what it is when you can't put your finger on it that makes a kid an odd person out. And it's probably a topic for endless films on this subject, and how much of that has to do with a kid's own insecurity and assuming that there must be something about me that's not right.
Well, and the crazy part is that I think that all teens to some extent feel as if they are unfairly targeted, even if they are part of the popular group, even if they're beautiful and talented and athletic and they get asked to prom and all of these things. It doesn't really matter that everybody's internal monologue is, it's me, I'm not doing this right, something's wrong with me. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, there are kids who are specifically targeted and it's horrific and we work to battle that all the time. But then I do feel like across the board, they could be the most talented, academically perfect, children on earth, and they are still suffering with this anxiety that they're not good enough.
Which in my grade school, when I graduated in the 8th grade, I remember there was a kid who was one of the most popular people in school, did really well academically, was very popular with the girls, and was really cool. And there was an article in one of the Detroit papers about preparing for tests or something, and they chose my school, which was Winship, and had a photograph in which this person was visible, and everyone was talking about it. And he's somebody who I was always kind of envious of to a certain extent. And years later, when I was a student at Wayne, I saw this person he was walking down the street, and I didn't really have a chance to talk to him that much, but he saw me and said, "Oh, Elliot." We talked a little bit, asked how he was doing, and he was describing, things are going fine. He's doing this, he's doing that. I tell you, I almost didn't pay that much attention because I was still jealous of him in a way.
Right.
And this person turned out to be a suicide weeks later.
Oh. Mm.
And at no point did I say, "Oh, I could have done something that day. I could have changed," because it was not like, but it was so startling to me.
Yeah.
That the person who had everything, and we all know this in a sense.
Yeah.
And yet we don't.
Mm.
So there's never enough films that can try to teach us about the dynamics of a group and how deadly it can be to be singled out and rejected. And whatever happened with this person, I don't know, but I've seen that happen a couple of times in my life to different folks.
Sure.
And it always makes you realize that maybe there is something you can do to just be kinder. I don't know.
Yeah, and that everybody's fighting their own battles, and that nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes with students, with teachers, with anybody, and the best we can do is try to surround ourselves with people who love and support us, and who we can love and support, and try to live our lives with love and kindness at the forefront.
Which is a good lesson for adults as well as adolescents. We live in a time of great divisiveness and anger and meanness, and it's never a bad idea to stop and think about how we're all behaving toward each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do we have questions here?
We've sort of been working our way through them. I see one that asks if teens are willing to watch films with subtitles, and I would say yes.
I would say yes too.
In the right circumstance. I actually watch everything with subtitles because I feel like I understand films better when I really can focus on the dialogue. My husband can't stand it, so I'll have when I get to pick the movie, subtitles, and when he gets to pick the movie, no subtitles. So that's great. But no, I think we covered all the other questions and the comments that people have asked. Phyllis reminds us it's about focusing on some point of difference, not all the similarities. She must have typed that comment and we were talking about something. I don't know what that's in reference to, but I think we covered everything that people were interested in chatting about.
I think so too. I'm going to add one quick thing before we go about the subtitling question. As somebody who has not only been exhibiting movies for a long time, but has been teaching for close to 6 years now, students who I have to explain things to, like who Cary Grant was, things that I said, what you don't know. Wait a minute, you never heard of? No, you have to get used to not everybody is your age. The issue of subtitling, the issue of black and white as opposed to color films and all of that are things that I did worry about when I began teaching, that they're not going to sit still for this, they're not going to watch the films. And a simple rule is it's the same with adults, it's the same with anybody. If people get involved in a movie, if the storytelling is good, they will forget later on that it was not in the English language, or that there were subtitles there, or it's such a chore to read. It's not if you're interested in what's going on. And it's really a matter simply of making a good picture. And people will will find a way to get involved in it. Once they just pay attention for a few minutes, if it takes them along, subtitles are not that big a problem.
Right.
So I would say it's a picture worth seeing. Those of you who haven't seen it yet, and there's still an opportunity, Jamie, right? People can still watch through the entire festival.
That's right.
Yeah.
Except for that one film I mentioned, all our films you can watch all the way through October 30th.
Right.
And I hear you trying to wrap up, but I have a question.
No.
This is one of the perks of being director is I get to pop on screen and ask my question.
I start wrapping up when I wake up. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
or as Mark Twain said, when you're born, you're finished. So please go ahead.
So Elliot mentioned something and went back in the day when I was a college professor, I had similar experiences. Like, what do you mean you don't know who X is? The media landscape of the world has fractured in the past 20 years, right? There's no water cooler shows, very few anyway, right? There's more ways to consume media and therefore more different kinds of media. And so there isn't that common language of everybody has seen this TV show, everybody has seen this film. And with that, I feel like media literacy has changed. Even though we have the whole world of film at our fingertips, we don't have someone telling us, oh, you should watch this.
It
right?
needs to be curated, right?
It needs to be
some
curated,
degree.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why we have festivals, but also I'm wondering, as for Rabbi Lader, as someone who works with teens a lot, do you find that the teens, how do they fill that gap when trying to understand a film? Like when I go to understand a film, I'm understanding it in terms of all of the other films that I've seen and sort of connecting the dots. And I assume they do a similar kind of thing, but they don't, it's a Nixon and the dinosaurs problem. Do you understand what I mean? Like anything that happened before them, if it's before them, it's in the before times. It doesn't matter whether it was 5 years before or 3 years before,
yeah,
100,000 years before. Whereas, when it was harder to find things, you were sort of forced to learn a little bit more about the chronology of film. So I guess what I'm asking is, what's your sense of the state of media literacy and film literacy among teens? Like, did they have a sense of what film was like in the 60s versus what it was like in the early 2000s? And does that change how they understand films?
So it's a good question. I think, where'd you go? You popped off. You just came to ask and then you're gone?
Sorry.
Yeah.
She's very shy.
Off there, as they say.
Shy and retiring.
So I really do. I actually think that our young people are incredible consumers of media and that they are all watching the same things, which is everything. They watch everything. And not only everything that's being produced now, but like everything from when I was growing up. And I'm, my mid 30s, and they have seen every single movie that I've ever seen and more because it's so accessible and they have such a different relationship with media than we did as kids, where we like went to the movie, saw a movie, and then we had seen the movie. They have access to 20 seasons of whatever at the tip of their fingers that they can watch at 2 a.m. from their bed. So I actually, we did a film a few weeks ago at the Temple, and the kids got to pick the movie. We did like a drive-in, COVID-safe experience outside, and they picked Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is like, it's like from my childhood. And so I really do think that they have experienced a lot of that breadth in a way that I didn't, because I couldn't watch 60s movies by clicking a button on Netflix the way that they can. So I think that today's teens are incredibly media savvy, and anything that they're interested in, they have access to the entire world. And as digital natives, they know where to find that stuff. So for the kids who are interested in film, I think they are far better watched and learned than we give them credit for.
I kind of wish I agreed with you, and I think that in some ways, like Ferris Bueller or the John Hughes films in general, I think there's something to that. And yet, I've got 35 students right now taking a course on Hitchcock films. And most of them said, "Oh, we think Hitchcock's great, and I want to see more Hitchcock films. Which ones have you seen?" And And it comes down to some of them have seen Rear Window, which surprised me, and I thought that was great. Very few of them had seen Psycho. I said, do you mean the new one, meaning the one that was made in color? Most of these films are available, and that curiosity to go out and pick something on purpose that's older, I think must be not that strong a drive unless you're specifically interested in the history of movies. And I'm not sure that it's that widespread because the flood of things is so huge. It's just so great. And I think that's also true of adults. The discussion groups that I lead occasionally, what are you watching? What have you seen lately? And a lot of the things will be those same highly touted Netflix series and miniseries that everybody is talking about or everybody is watching, which to some degree was true of movie going when, in the 1960s, there were certain films that you had to see. But that splintering through streaming, delivery, and cable stations and all of these different forms, I think has and I'm talking pre-pandemic now, certainly brought down traditional movie attendance and has changed that common water cooler thing that we were all talking about. There is no Walter Cronkite for people to go to when they're watching television now. And having more choice certainly can be a great thing. But sometimes when people are left at sea, they don't necessarily know the life preserver from the anchor. And so I do worry a little bit about the lack of curation, but I think that may turn itself around with some of the streaming services that are out there and the impact of festivals like this one, which are really beautifully packaged and put together. Except for me sitting here talking about things. Anyway.
Well, I hope that when my teenagers come to your classes, they've seen lots of wonderful foreign Israeli films with subtitles and have discussed them at great length.
Absolutely will. Absolutely will. You were about to say, Jamie.
Well, I was just about to say thank you.
Thank you. Well, you're welcome.
To Elliot, thank you to Rabbi Lader. Thank you to everyone for coming. We do have another one of these discussions tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll be discussing City of Joel with Howard Lupovich, one of our wonderful local educators. So thank you all for coming. Thank you to our guests. We'll bring them on for one more little round of applause. Thank you so much to everyone, and have a great evening.